"You don't belong here." Those 4 words cut through the noise of New York City's night like a blade. Marcus Ellington had heard plenty of dismissive comments in his 48 years, but this one, delivered by a stone-faced security guard standing at the gleaming glass doors of the Skyline Grand Hotel, hit different. He stopped mid-stride, his polished black Oxfords catching the glow of the marquee above. Behind the guard, the lobby shimmered with crystal chandeliers, champagne flutes, and the quiet hum of Manhattan's most exclusive corporate mixer, Executive Horizons. This was supposed to be his night, a night to connect, to inspire, to stand on stage as the keynote speaker before a room full of the city's most powerful executives. Instead, the guard's hand was planted firmly against his chest, blocking his path as if he were a trespasser. "General admissions around the corner," the guard said, his voice carrying just enough volume to catch the attention of the polished crowd inside. Some turned to look. A few smirked. 1 or 2 raised their phones, ready to capture whatever spectacle might unfold. Marcus adjusted the silk knot of his deep red tie. His tailored charcoal suit fit like it was poured over him, the soft gleam of his Audemars Piguet watch winking under the hotel's lights. To anyone who knew, these were subtle signals of a man who had arrived. But to those who didn't, or didn't care, they were invisible. A woman with a sleek headset and clipboard swept over, her heels clicking against the marble. "Sometimes invitations get sent by mistake," she said sweetly, though her eyes told a different story. Somewhere off to the side, an influencer's phone went live, her voice carrying a note of disbelief. "They're stopping a black man in a custom suit from walking into VIP. Y'all need to see this." Marcus exhaled slowly, letting the moment stretch. And then, with a voice smooth enough to mask the steel beneath, he reached for his phone. "Activate Protocol 9. Stay with me, because in the next few minutes, this moment will flip from humiliation to one of the most unforgettable reversals you've ever seen." Coleman, the security guard, did not move his hand from Marcus's chest. Another guard stepped in from the side, a younger man with a shaved head and a stance that said he was ready to back up whatever his partner decided. The marble under Marcus's feet seemed to hum with the combined tension of the moment. Conversations inside the lobby quieted. The sparkle of the chandeliers above felt like a spotlight on a scene no one expected to watch tonight. "I told you," Coleman repeated, his voice carrying just enough for people inside and outside to hear. "This area is reserved for verified VIP guests only." Marcus's gaze didn't waver. "And I told you," he replied evenly. "I have platinum access." The woman with the headset, Tracy Whitmore, shifted closer, glancing quickly at the growing crowd gathering outside the doors. "We have very strict standards for this event," she said, her tone laced with a kind of politeness that feels more like a slap. "General admission is just around the corner. The line moves quickly." From behind the glass, a group of executives in tailored suits sipped champagne and watched like it was free entertainment. One, a silver-haired man with a navy tie, leaned toward his colleague and said, "Finally, someone's checking credentials the right way." His friend smirked, nodding in agreement. The influencer's live stream caught every word, her phone angled just right to capture Marcus, the guards, and the onlookers. Comments rolled in faster than she could read them. "Why is this happening?" one asked. Another typed, "This is New York, not 1950. Coleman took a half-step forward, crowding Marcus's personal space. "Sir, I am asking you one more time to step aside. You're holding up our real VIPs." Marcus could feel the eyes on him, the whispers, the cameras. The moment was no longer just a misunderstanding, it had turned into a public display, one that drew a line between who was allowed inside and who wasn't. Jade Moreno, the influencer, spoke directly to her viewers now. "This man is dressed better than anyone in that lobby, and they're still treating him like he doesn't belong. Remember this." Marcus adjusted his cufflinks slowly, deliberately, letting the silence hang for just a moment longer. "You're sure you want to keep going down this road?" he asked, his voice calm but edged with something sharp. Coleman's answer came without hesitation. "Positive." The crowd pressed in a little closer, sensing the confrontation was far from over. Within minutes, Jade Moreno's livestream was no longer just a curiosity among her regular followers. It was exploding. The viewer count jumped from 5,000 to 20,000, then past 30, climbing faster than the doorman could wave in the next polished guest. Comments were flying in so quickly they blurred on her screen, a digital roar of outrage, disbelief, and heated debate. "Is this real? In 2024? Someone wrote. Another chimed in, "Name the hotel. Tag everyone. Let's make this viral." Others argued back, claiming rules were rules, defending the security team without knowing the full story. The divide was sharp, and it was growing. Inside the lobby, a few younger guests were now holding their own phones up, streaming from different angles. One caught the silver-haired executive's smirk in crystal clarity. His champagne glass lifted like a toast to the scene. The clip hit Twitter within seconds with the caption, "Standards upheld," sparking its own wave of backlash. Hashtags began forming without coordination. Hashtag Skyline Bias, hashtag VIP While Black, hashtag Ellington Moment. Each one fed the algorithm, drawing more eyes to the standoff at the glass doors of the Skyline Grand Hotel. Jade barely had to narrate now. Her camera spoke for her, catching every detail. The flex of Coleman's jaw, the measured way Marcus stood his ground, the flicker of discomfort on Tracy's face as she realized more and more phones were pointed their way. National bloggers picked up the feed. A journalist from a major news site tweeted, "If you're not watching what's happening in Midtown right now, you should be." Local radio hosts started playing audio clips pulled straight from Jade's stream. Marcus, still calm, glanced sideways toward the crowd. He could hear snippets, people muttering about lawsuits, others about calling the press, a few wondering aloud who exactly he was. He didn't move to explain. He didn't have to. Every second the stream stayed live, the narrative was writing itself. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, blending with the city's constant hum. And on the sidewalk outside the hotel, the number of people holding up phones doubled again. What had started as a quiet humiliation was becoming a public reckoning, one view, one comment, one share at a time. The sidewalk outside the Skyline Grand was no longer just a place for passers-by. It had become a stage. What started as a handful of curious onlookers was now a dense crowd, pressing closer to the velvet ropes and glass doors. The warm glow from the lobby spilled onto the street, catching faces lit by the bluish light of phone screens. Every direction Marcus looked, someone was recording. A black SUV rolled up to the curb, and out stepped a cameraman from a local news station, tripod slung over his shoulder. Behind him, a reporter in a navy coat spoke urgently into her earpiece, scanning the scene. She had the same expression you see when a breaking story drops in the middle of a slow news night. Sharp, hungry, ready to broadcast. From across the street, another crew jogged toward the hotel entrance. They weren't the only ones. Independent vloggers, podcasters, and neighborhood journalists, all drawn by the rapid spread of hashtags, began setting up wherever they could find space. Inside the lobby, the mood shifted. Conversations dropped to murmurs as more lenses pointed inward. The once easy smiles of the champagne crowd began to stiffen. A few guests quietly slipped outside doors, not wanting to be captured in the background of whatever this was becoming. Others stayed, curious, leaning against marble columns for a better view. Coleman and the second guard adjusted their stances, now aware that their every movement was being magnified on multiple live feeds. Tracy's grip on her clipboard tightened, her gaze darting between the growing press outside and the managers she knew were somewhere in the building, surely watching the same streams. Marcus remained still, his posture calm but unyielding. He didn't need to raise his voice or argue. The crowd was speaking for him now, their murmurs mixing with the occasional shout from someone in the back demanding the hotel let him in. The city's usual midtown rhythm, horns, footsteps, the distant hum of traffic, was being drowned out by the sound of people gathering, cameras clicking, and the low buzz of a moment turning into a story. And the press, now fully present, was about to make sure that story went far beyond these glass doors. Marcus shifted his weight slightly, just enough to free one hand. Without a word, he reached into the inner pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out his phone. The movement was deliberate, controlled, like a chess player moving a single piece that would decide the entire game. He unlocked the screen with a quick swipe, the soft glow of the display lighting his face. Then, one by one, he began taking photos. First, Coleman's name badge. Clicked. Then the younger guard's badge and posture. Clicked. Tracy's tightly gripped clipboard and her expression, half defiance, half discomfort. Clicked. The crowd noticed. A murmur ran through the onlookers as phones tilted in his direction, capturing the moment. Marcus didn't rush. He angled each shot carefully, ensuring every detail was preserved, the gold trim of the Skyline Grand's entrance doors, the reflection of the lobby lights on the marble floor, the faces of the executives still watching from behind the glass. Next, he pivoted slightly to the side and captured the silver-haired man's smirk as he leaned against the bar inside. Clicked. Then the woman standing next to him, her lips curled in amusement. Clicked. Every image was evidence, but it was also something more. It was leverage. As he worked, Marcus said nothing. His silence became its own kind of statement. Each quiet movement pushed the tension higher, leaving everyone wondering what he planned to do with those photos. Jade's livestream zoomed in on his hands. "He's documenting everything," she whispered to her audience, the awe in her voice clear. Her viewers responded instantly, filling the chat with speculation about who Marcus was and why he seemed so confident in the middle of a confrontation that would rattle most people. When he finished, Marcus lowered his phone but didn't put it away. Instead, he glanced at the growing number of cameras aimed at him and spoke in a voice low enough to make people lean in. "You're all going to want to remember this moment," he said calmly. "Because I certainly will." He slipped the phone back into his pocket, adjusted his jacket, and took one slow step forward. It wasn't enough to breach Coleman's wall, but it was enough to signal that the next move would be his, and it would be decisive. The lobby's murmur turned into a hush when Marcus's phone began to buzz in his pocket. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and allowed the faintest smile to touch his lips. Without hesitation, he tapped the answer button and pressed the speaker icon. "This is Eleanor Kane," a commanding voice boomed through the device. Even over the faint background noise of what sounded like a moving vehicle, her tone carried the weight of someone used to being obeyed. "Who exactly is in charge at the Skyline Grand tonight?" Tracy's head snapped toward the phone. Coleman stiffened but didn't speak. A suited man from deeper in the lobby hurried forward, his name tag reading Operations Manager. "This is Brent Walters, ma'am." "By Walters," Eleanor interrupted sharply. "Do you know you have Marcus Ellington, CEO of Ellington Global Media and one of our largest private investors, standing outside your doors being treated like an uninvited guest?" The crowd reacted audibly. Some gasped. Others turned to each other in disbelief. Cameras zoomed in on Marcus's face, calm and steady as Eleanor continued. "Do you also know," she pressed on, "that he's your keynote speaker for tonight's Executive Horizons event? The man you are publicly humiliating in front of a growing national audience is a major shareholder and controls contracts worth millions to this chain." Coleman's hand dropped from Marcus's chest as if burned. Tracy's grip on her clipboard loosened. Inside the lobby, the silver-haired man who had been smirking moments ago looked down at his drink, suddenly fascinated by the bubbles in his champagne. Eleanor's voice sharpened even more. "I suggest someone open those doors immediately, apologize in front of every witness, and prepare to answer for the damage you've caused. And make no mistake, there will be damage." Brent Walters swallowed hard, glancing at Marcus with a mix of fear and regret. The glass doors suddenly felt less like a barrier and more like a mistake that needed undoing fast. But Marcus didn't move toward them yet. He stood exactly where he was, letting the full weight of Eleanor Kane's words settle into the room. The shift in power was complete. Every eye was on him now, waiting to see what he would do with it. Marcus let the silence linger a few seconds longer, just enough for every person within earshot to feel the weight of what had just shifted. Then he stepped forward, the polished tip of his shoe crossing the threshold of the glass doors. "I am going to make this simple," he said, his voice low but carrying. "If Skyline Hotels intends to keep my company's $15 million annual contract, there are 10 changes that start tonight." The crowd stilled. Phones lifted higher. Tracy's eyes darted toward the reporters outside, fully aware that every word would be replayed by morning. "First," Marcus began, "immediate termination of every staff member directly involved in this incident. That includes the guards who blocked me and the manager who allowed it to continue." Coleman shifted uncomfortably. "Second, mandatory anti-bias training for all staff, management, and executives, completed within 60 days and refreshed quarterly. Third, a public incident report system with third-party oversight. Anonymous submissions, independent investigations, and quarterly results published online." He took another slow step into the lobby, eyes locked on Brent Walters. "Fourth, clear objective verification protocols that apply to every guest equally, no matter their skin color, clothing, or perceived status. Fifth, creation of a diversity and equity advisory board with the power to review policies and enforce changes. Sixth, a monthly public diversity performance report, including complaint resolution rates and demographic data." The hum of the crowd was gone now. Only his voice filled the space. Seventh, $100,000 annually to local civil rights organizations in each major market where Skyline operates. Eighth, diversity performance metrics built into management evaluations. Failure to meet them means termination. Ninth, an annual review of all guest-facing policies to eliminate systemic bias. He paused, letting the tension peak before delivering the final point. 10th, a public apology delivered within 72 hours, acknowledging what happened tonight and outlining exactly how it will never happen again. Marcus straightened his jacket. These terms are non-negotiable. Agree to them or consider our contract, and every future dollar that comes with it, gone. No one in the lobby moved. The balance of power was no longer in question. Marcus had it, and he knew exactly how to use it. Brent Walters swallowed hard, his Adam's apple shifting as if he had just realized the stakes. He glanced at Tracy, then at Coleman, then back at Marcus. The silence pressed on him like a physical weight. Understood, Brent said finally, his voice tight. He pulled his phone from his pocket and stepped a few feet away, speaking quickly into it. The words were short, clipped, and unmistakable. Terminate and escort them out now. Within moments, 2 senior hotel staff appeared from a side hallway. They approached Coleman and the younger guard first. Hand over your badges, one of them said firmly. Coleman's jaw tightened, but he unclipped the badge from his shirt and passed it over. The younger guard followed, his eyes fixed on the floor. Next came Tracy. Her clipboard hung limp in her hands. Ms. Whitmore, the staff member said, you're relieved of duty. Please come with us. She hesitated, opening her mouth as if to argue, but the look in Brent's eyes stopped her. Slowly, she set the clipboard down on the marble counter and walked toward the exit. The crowd inside shifted, making space as the 3 of them were led toward a side door. Every step they took was captured on dozens of phones. Outside, reporters angled their cameras to catch the moment they disappeared from view. Brent returned, his phone still in hand. All 3 have been terminated effective immediately, he said to Marcus, his tone careful now, deferential. Their access has been revoked. Security is escorting them off the property. Marcus nodded once, his expression unchanged. That's a start, he said quietly. He glanced toward Jade's livestream camera and added, but we still have 9 more points to address. The onlookers murmured. This was no longer just about a confrontation at the door. It was about watching an entire institution forced to pivot in real time. Outside, the news crews were already broadcasting the images. In living rooms and on smartphones across the city, viewers watched uniformed staff escort the very people who had stood so confidently in Marcus's way only minutes earlier. The reversal was complete, and it had happened in front of everyone. And Marcus, still standing in the center of the lobby, looked as though he had only just begun. By the next morning, the incident at the Skyline Grand was no longer just a local story. It had become a headline splashed across national news outlets. Every major network aired the footage. Marcus Ellington standing calm and composed as 3 employees were removed, his list of demands replayed in full. The hashtags #SkylineBias and #EllingtonMoment were trending in every major U.S. city. Industry blogs that normally focused on quarterly earnings and real estate developments were suddenly talking about diversity protocols, anti-bias training, and the cost of corporate reputation. Trade publications dissected Marcus's 10 demands like they were a new form of corporate policy blueprint. Within 48 hours, executives from other luxury hotel chains were holding emergency board meetings. They were reviewing their own guest access procedures, looking for gaps that could cause the same kind of public disaster. Several brands announced immediate reviews of their bias training programs, hoping to avoid becoming the next viral cautionary tale. Civil rights organizations capitalized on the momentum. They cited Marcus's demands as a model for how companies could move beyond apologies and into measurable change. Advocacy groups began calling it the Ellington Protocol, a framework that balanced accountability with actionable steps. Meanwhile, the footage continued to spread online. Clips of Eleanor Kane's voice blasting through the speakerphone became a meme, while Marcus's calm line, "These terms are non-negotiable," was quoted on everything from LinkedIn posts to protest signs. Even corporate investors took notice. Shares in Skyline's parent company dipped briefly after the incident, only to rebound once the chain publicly committed to implementing every one of Marcus's conditions. Analysts on financial news programs pointed out that the quick recovery was tied directly to the perception that the brand was willing to change. And perhaps most telling, employees at hotels across the country began sharing their own experiences online. Some were uplifting, stories of managers who stepped in to prevent discrimination. Others were less flattering, describing quiet moments of bias that had never been addressed. For the hospitality industry, the message was clear. What happened at the Skyline Grand was not an isolated event. It was a warning shot, a public reminder that in the age of instant broadcasting, every action or inaction could shape a company's legacy overnight. 3 months later, the Skyline Grand Hotel looked and felt different. The changes were not just cosmetic, they were structural, visible in every interaction from the moment a guest stepped through the doors. The once intimidating platinum entrance now displayed a sleek sign in gold letters, "All guests welcome, verification upon request only." Inside, the lobby staff reflected a new standard. The front desk was staffed by a diverse team, trained not just in service etiquette but in bias awareness and conflict de-escalation. Guests were greeted with the same warm tone and attentive service, whether they wore a designer suit or jeans and a travel backpack. The most noticeable change hung on a wall near the concierge desk, the Skyline Accountability Dashboard. Updated monthly, it displayed real numbers in bold digital print: guest satisfaction scores, bias incident reports, resolution rates, and diversity training completion percentages. In the last update, bias incidents had dropped by 86% across all Skyline properties. Staff training compliance was at 99%. Minority guest satisfaction ratings had risen nearly 3 points on a 10-point scale. Managers at the Skyline Grand now met every 2 weeks for inclusion review sessions. They discussed real scenarios submitted through the anonymous reporting app and how staff handled them. The advisory board, made up of community leaders, legal experts, and hospitality professionals, had direct authority to recommend policy changes, and those changes were implemented without delay. Marcus's influence was still felt. His company had expanded its partnership with Skyline Hotels by an additional $4 million annually, with a portion of that earmarked for ongoing diversity initiatives. In the hospitality industry, the Skyline model had become a case study, discussed in business schools and hospitality management programs nationwide. Guests noticed the shift. Regular travelers began recommending Skyline properties, not just for the quality of their rooms but for the assurance that they would be treated with respect. For many, that was worth more than thread count or room size. And in the corner of the lobby, a bronze plaque quietly marked the turning point. It read, "In commitment to dignity, equity, and respect for all guests." Beneath it was a single line, "Change is not a statement, it's a practice." The media counterstrike was as strategic as it was powerful. 2 weeks after the new Skyline policies went public, Ellington Global Media announced a documentary project titled, "When Bias Meets Business." The film would follow the events of that night at the Skyline Grand, but it would go further, examining how bias operates in corporate spaces, and how companies can dismantle it without destroying themselves in the process. Marcus didn't hire just any production team. He partnered with a respected documentary filmmaker known for turning social issues into compelling, high-impact stories. The project was co-hosted by Jade Moreno, whose live stream had ignited the viral firestorm. Her raw footage became the spine of the narrative, guiding viewers through every moment from the first confrontation at the door to the immediate and lasting reforms that followed. The first teaser trailer dropped online, clocking in at just over 90 seconds. It opened with Jade's shaky phone camera capturing Coleman's arm blocking Marcus at the entrance. The next cut showed Eleanor Kane's voice thundering over speakerphone. The final shot was the bronze plaque in the Skyline lobby, glinting under soft lighting. Within 24 hours, the teaser had over 3 million views. Industry insiders began sharing it on LinkedIn with captions like, "This is the future of accountability," and required viewing for every executive. When the full documentary premiered on Netflix, it landed in the platform's global top 10 within days. Audiences praised it for being both damning and constructive, exposing systemic problems while showing a clear, measurable path forward. Business schools began adding it to their leadership and ethics courses. Corporate training departments licensed clips for their own internal programs. For Marcus, the release wasn't about personal vindication. It was about keeping the conversation alive, ensuring that what happened at the Skyline Grand would be a catalyst for lasting change. In interviews promoting the film, he repeated a line that had already become one of his signatures: "Accountability is not a one-time statement. It's an ongoing responsibility." By the time the credits rolled, the message was clear. This wasn't just a story about one night in New York. It was a blueprint for how power, when wielded with precision and patience, could transform an industry. And Marcus had made sure the whole world was watching. The ripple effect reached far beyond the hospitality industry. 2 months after the documentary's release, Marcus Ellington announced the launch of the Equity in Leadership Fund, a $5 million initiative designed to support leadership training for underrepresented groups across the country. The goal was clear: equip the next generation of executives, entrepreneurs, and decision-makers with the skills, confidence, and network to rise, and to lead with integrity. The fund partnered with universities, community colleges, and non-profit organizations. Scholarships were awarded to students pursuing degrees in business, hospitality management, and public policy. Grants were provided to grassroots groups offering mentorship and career development in underserved communities. Marcus insisted that the fund operate with measurable outcomes. Every dollar spent would be tied to trackable progress in placement, promotion, and retention of diverse leaders. Corporate allies quickly joined in. Companies that had watched the Skyline incident unfold recognized both the moral and strategic value of aligning with the initiative. Within 6 months, contributions from these partners pushed the total fund to $20 million. With that increase, the program expanded into more than a dozen cities, each with its own advisory board to tailor training to local needs. Marcus made it personal. He visited schools in Brooklyn, Detroit, and Atlanta, speaking directly to students about his journey. He told them about the night at the Skyline Grand, not as a story of humiliation, but as an example of how preparation and patience could turn adversity into leverage. He encouraged them to create their own protocols, systems of response that would allow them to act strategically when faced with bias or exclusion. The impact was immediate. Young professionals who completed the first training cycles began landing positions in management and board-level roles. Some even returned to mentor the next wave of participants, creating a self-sustaining cycle of growth and empowerment. For Marcus, it was never just about fixing one hotel's policies. It was about changing the ecosystem that allowed those policies, and the attitudes behind them, to exist in the first place. The Equity and Leadership Fund was proof that the most powerful legacy a leader could leave wasn't just in contracts or profits, but in the people they helped rise alongside them. The night at the Skyline Grand was more than a viral headline. It was a lesson in how preparation, composure, and strategic thinking can turn an unfair moment into lasting change. Marcus Ellington could have reacted with anger, and no one would have blamed him. Instead, he chose to act with precision. He documented, he leveraged his resources, and he shifted the conversation from personal insult to systemic accountability. In life, we are all going to face moments where we are underestimated, excluded, or judged unfairly. The instinct may be to fight in the heat of the moment, but real influence often comes from stepping back, assessing the landscape, and moving with purpose. Marcus had a plan before he ever walked through those doors, and that plan allowed him to turn a confrontation into a catalyst. The lesson is simple but powerful. Have your own protocol. Know your value, understand your leverage, and prepare for the moments when you will need to use both. Whether you are running a company, managing a team, or just navigating your own career, the ability to respond with strategy instead of impulse can be the difference between a temporary win and permanent change. Marcus's story reminds us that dignity is not just about demanding respect, it is about building the conditions where respect becomes non-negotiable. And sometimes, the best revenge is not in winning the argument, but in rewriting the rules for everyone who comes after you.